compliance for the Coldwater Valley Unified School District for 19 years. And I want to begin by saying that I am not a person who is inclined toward alarm. My work is the opposite of drama. I reconcile invoices against contracts. I confirm that a roof inspection actually occurred before we pay for it. I make sure that when the district spends public money on a chiller or a fire panel or a month of natural gas, there is a paper trail deep enough that an outside auditor from the state could follow it without asking me a single question. My performance reviews use words like meticulous and unremarkable, and I have always taken both as compliments. I am writing this account because I needed to exist somewhere outside the district systems. I have tried to raise the matter through the appropriate channels, and I have come to understand that the appropriate channels are part of the problem. So I am doing the only thing I know how to do, which is to document. The annual facilities expenditure audit is not a discretionary project. State law requires districts of our size to certify each fiscal year that operational expenditures on physical plant correspond to actual district assets. In practice, this means I pull the full facilities general ledger, break it out by cost center, and tie each recurring expense to a specific building in our asset inventory. We have 31 active facilities, 19 schools, a district office, 2 transportation yards, a central kitchen, a warehouse, a maintenance and operations complex, and a handful of small structures like pump houses and the old adult education annex. Every one of them carries a facility code. The code is how the money finds the building. I run the audit the same way every year. I export the 12 months of facilities expenditures into a working spreadsheet, sort by facility code, and look for cost centers whose spending falls outside the expected band for a building of that type and size. A high school runs hot on electricity in September and low in July. A warehouse should show almost nothing but lighting load and a fire alarm monitoring line. When a number sits outside its band, I flag it and chase it down. Usually it is a meter that got misread, or a work order coded to the wrong site, or a vendor who billed us twice. The system is designed to surface exactly these mistakes, and it does. That is why I trust it. This year the flag was Building 14C. I did not recognize the code, which by itself was not alarming. Facility codes accumulate over decades, and a large district carries dead codes for demolished buildings, sold parcels, and structures that were renamed during some reorganization before my time. What caught my attention was that 14C was not dead. It was one of the most consistent cost centers in the entire ledger. It had spent money every single month of the fiscal year in every operational category with the smooth regularity of a building that was fully occupied and well run. I want to be precise about what consistent means because the consistency is the first thing that bothered me before I understood anything else. A real building's costs are noisy. Occupancy changes. A compressor fails. Someone leaves a door propped and the gas bill spikes. 14C's costs were not noisy. Its electrical consumption tracked a clean seasonal curve. Its water usage held within a narrow monthly range consistent with restroom and janitorial demand for a mid-size facility. Its natural gas billing followed heating degree days almost exactly. It looked in the numbers like a textbook example of a competently operated building. It looked honestly better than most of our real buildings. My first assumption was the ordinary one. Somebody had a coding error and a real building's expenses were being split between its correct code and 14C. This happens. The fix is to identify the parent building and merge the codes. So I went to the asset inventory to find out which campus 14C belonged to. It did not belong to any campus. In our facilities management software, we run an industry standard system used by thousands of districts. Building 14C exists as its own top-level facility. It has a facility name, Building 14C. It has a facility type, Educational Ancillary. It has a listed gross square footage of 24,180. It has a year-built field, which reads 1979. It has a service address on a county road on the far northeast edge of the district, in an area I knew to be agricultural. It has a full record, in other words. What it does not have is a parent. It is not a wing of a school. It is a standalone building that the district has been operating, according to the system, since before I was born. The reasonable next step was to look at the building. Not physically, I mean in the records. I wanted to see the construction project that created it. Every district building has a capital project file, the board resolution authorizing it, the architect's contract, the bid documents, the construction contract, the pay applications, the inspection reports, the notice of completion, and the certificate of occupancy. That file is the birth certificate of a building. You cannot spend 40 years operating a facility without one, because you cannot legally occupy a structure without a certificate of occupancy, and you cannot get a certificate of occupancy without a construction permit, and you cannot get a construction permit without plans. There is no capital project file for Building 14C. There is no board resolution authorizing its construction. There is no architect's contract. There are no plans in the archive, and I checked the archive personally because our older plan sets are stored as physical rolls in the maintenance and operations complex, and I did not trust that their absence from the digital index meant they did not exist. They do not exist. There is no construction permit on file with the county. There is no certificate of occupancy. I pulled our complete file of certificates of occupancy, which we are required to retain permanently, and 14C is not among them. I have been doing this long enough that at this stage I still felt calm, because at this stage there is still a normal explanation. Old districts absorbed other districts. Coldwater Valley Unified was formed in 1974 from the consolidation of 3 smaller districts, and consolidation is messy. It is entirely plausible that a building was inherited from a predecessor district and that its original construction records were lost in the transition. The building would still be real. Its paperwork would simply be incomplete. This is a known category of problem, and there is a procedure for it. So I set out to confirm that Building 14C is real, expecting to close the flag with a note that the construction file was lost in consolidation. I want to walk through what I actually found, in the order I found it, because the order matters. Any one of these findings alone would be an ordinary records problem. It was the way they stacked, each one independently confirming the building while the physical evidence for it stayed empty, that eventually stopped feeling ordinary. I started with the utilities, because utilities are the hardest evidence a building can have. A ghost line in an accounting system is one thing. An electric utility does not bill you for consumption that did not occur. Meters are physical. So I contacted our electric provider's commercial accounts department and asked for the service history on the 14C account. They had it. The service address matched. The account had been active continuously since 1981. The representative pulled up the consumption history without hesitation and read me monthly kilowatt-hour figures going back years. When I asked about the meter, she gave me a meter number and told me it was an active, communicating meter. One of the modern units that reports consumption automatically over the network several times a day. She told me the meter had last reported that morning. She told me its firmware version. She told me the date of its last field inspection by a utility technician, which was 14 months prior, and read me the technician's note, which said the meter was in good condition and reading accurately. I asked her, as neutrally as I could, whether she could confirm there was a building at that address. She was confused by the question. She said the account had commercial three-phase service at a load consistent with a mid-sized institutional building, that consumption had been steady for decades, and that from the utility's perspective, there was obviously something there drawing power, because you cannot draw power without something to draw it into. She was right. That is how electricity works. The water utility told me the same kind of story with different details. Metered consumption, a physical meter, a service line tapped off the county main in 1980, backflow prevention device tested annually as required for a commercial account, last tested 5 months prior by a certified tester whose name and certification number they provided. The gas utility told me the same. The internet service provider had an active fiber circuit to the address, provisioned at a bandwidth appropriate for a school building, with a service contract that renewed automatically each year, and a circuit ID I could have called in a trouble ticket against. At this point, I did something I want to describe carefully, because it is the moment the audit stopped being an audit for me. I called the internet provider's network operations center, and I asked them on the pretext of a service verification whether the circuit to that address was currently passing traffic. The technician put me on hold, came back, and told me the circuit was up. The customer premise equipment was online and responding to management pings, and the circuit had been passing a normal baseline of traffic consistent with an occupied facility. He said the router at the far end had an uptime of over 400 days. He read me its interface statistics. Something at that address was answering. 4 independent utilities, 4 physical infrastructures, wires, pipes, fiber, 4 sets of instruments reporting consumption. None of them had any reason to lie to me, and none of them had any connection to our accounting system or to each other. They agreed. I moved to the maintenance records next, and this is where the sense of a system, a real operating system, first became overwhelming. Because a building does not only consume utilities, a building is maintained and maintenance is done by people. Building 14C is on every preventive maintenance schedule the district runs. Its HVAC equipment, 2 rooftop units and a boiler, per the equipment inventory, is on the quarterly filter change and annual inspection schedule. I pulled the inspection reports. They are complete. They list model numbers and serial numbers for the units. They list refrigerant charge levels, belt condition, amperage draws on the fan motors. The most recent one, from that spring, noted that the boiler's low water cutoff had been tested and that a contactor on the west rooftop unit was showing wear and should be replaced within the year. It was signed by a technician who works for our regular mechanical contractor, a firm we have used for 12 years and whose work I have audited dozens of times without ever finding a problem. The fire alarm system at 14C is inspected annually, as code requires, by our fire protection contractor. The reports list the panel type, the number of initiating devices, the number of notification appliances, and the results of the functional test. The building's fire sprinkler system, it has a wet pipe sprinkler system, according to the records. is inspected annually as well, with the flow test results recorded. The emergency and exit lighting is tested monthly and certified annually. The roof is inspected each fall and each spring, and the reports include photographs. I need to say something about the photographs, and I need to say it carefully because it is the single piece of evidence I have been least able to explain and most unwilling to think about. There are photographs, the roof inspection reports for Building 14C, going back through the digital records to 2006 and continuing every 6 months since, include photographs. They show a roof. It is a flat, single-ply membrane roof, typical of institutional construction of that era, with 2 rooftop HVAC units, several plumbing vents, a roof drain and overflow, and the parapet edge visible at the margins of the frames. The photographs are dated. The membrane ages across them the way a real roof ages. You can see the surface weathering, a ponding stain spreading near a drain over several years, a patch appearing over what must have been a repaired leak. Season to season, the light changes. In the autumn photographs, there is dry vegetation visible beyond the parapet. In one winter set, there is snow on the membrane and on the units. Somebody stood on that roof twice a year for at least 18 years and photographed it. The photographs are not staged, and they are not the same photographs reused. The equipment ages, the repairs accumulate, the weather changes. Either there is a roof or someone has been maintaining an extraordinarily detailed and pointless forgery on a schedule for decades, buried in reports that no one but a compliance auditor would ever open. I have inspected enough real roofs to know what real roof inspection photographs look like. These look real. I contacted the roofing contractor. This was an uncomfortable call because I could not think of a way to ask what I needed to ask without sounding as though I doubted their work, which I did not. The man I spoke with was a senior estimator who had been with the firm for over 20 years. When I gave him the address, he knew it immediately. He said they had held the district's roofing maintenance contract for as long as he could remember, and that 14C was on the semi-annual schedule. I asked him plainly whether his crews physically went to the building. He said of course they did. That was the whole point of a physical inspection. I asked what the building looked like. There was a pause. It was not a frightened pause. It was the pause of a man being asked a question so obvious he assumed he was misunderstanding it. He said it was a single-story building, tan, on a county road out past the irrigation district. Nothing special. One of dozens of school buildings his crews rotated through. He said the access road was gravel and got muddy in spring, and his crews complained about it. He remembered the mud. He remembered complaining about the mud on a road to a building I could not find on any map, because I had by then checked the maps. Our district GIS shows every facility as a footprint on a base layer of county parcels and recent aerial imagery. Every one of our 31 facilities has a footprint. Building 14C has a point, a single dot at the service address labeled with its facility code, but it has no footprint because there is nothing under the dot to trace. The aerial imagery at that location shows a rectangle of bare, disturbed ground within a larger agricultural field, bounded by what might be a fence line, with a pale track leading to it from the county road. There is no building. I pulled the historical aerial imagery, which our GIS holds back to 1994, and which the county holds, in flight photography, back to the 1950s. In none of it, in any year, is there a building at that location. There is, in the older imagery, only open field. In the imagery from the 1990s onward, there is the bare rectangle in the track, as though a site had been cleared and prepared for a building that was never placed on it. No foundation was ever poured there. I confirm this the way you confirm anything about buried infrastructure, which is by asking the people who dig. I called the county's utility locate service and requested a locate ticket history for the parcel, thinking that if there were water, gas, electric, and fiber running to a building, there would be a documented network of buried lines and a history of locates performed before anyone dug near them. There is a locate history. It is extensive. The utility lines are marked in the locate records as running from the county road across the field to the site. The locators have physically painted those lines on the ground and flagged them repeatedly over the years because vendors kept requesting locates before doing work. The lines are there. They are buried. They run to the rectangle of bare ground. And then, according to every locate ticket, they stop at the edge of a building that the same locate tickets describe as being present at the site. I understand how this sounds. I have read it back to myself many times. 4 utilities delivering measured, consumed resources through physical, located, buried infrastructure to a site that aerial photography, ground preparation records, and the plain absence of a foundation all say has never held a building. Every system that would notice a building is present says the building is there. Every system that would notice its construction says it was never built. This was the point at which I stopped treating the matter as an audit finding and started, without fully admitting it to myself, treating it as something I needed to understand before I could safely write it down. So I did what our field is trained to do when the documents disagree with each other. I went to the people. I interviewed the ones who had been here longest. I started with our recently retired Director of Maintenance and Operations, a man named Dale who ran our physical plant for 31 years and hired half the people who now work under me. I have known Dale my whole career. He is not fanciful. He is a former Navy machinist mate who thinks in terms of run hours and mean time between failures. I took him to lunch and told him I was cleaning up the facility inventory and had a question about 14C. He did not blink at the code. He said 14C had been on the books since before he started, that it was one of the ancillary buildings out on the northeast side, and that as far as he was concerned, it ran itself. When I asked him what was in it, he thought about it and said he honestly wasn't sure anymore. Storage, he thought, and some old district records, maybe some surplus equipment. He said nobody worked out of it. When I asked him when he had last been inside it, he could not remember having been inside it. He had run the district's physical plant for 31 years and could not remember ever entering one of his own buildings. He did not find this strange until I pointed it out, and even then he only shrugged and said there were buildings he rarely visited because they never gave him any trouble, and 14C never gave him any trouble. It just sat there, he said, and it never cost more than it should, and the inspections always came back clean. So he left it alone. You don't go looking for problems in the one building that never has any, he told me. That is a sound maintenance philosophy. It is also, I have come to think, exactly the mechanism by which this has survived. I asked Dale one more thing. I asked whether anyone had ever tried to take 14C off the books. He got quiet, in a way I had not seen from him before, and said that yes, back in the 90s, during a budget crisis, someone in business services had tried to close out the 14C cost center to save the operating money, on the theory that a storage building could be mothballed. I asked what happened. Dale said it caused a mess. The utility accounts went into some kind of billing failure. The state facilities report wouldn't reconcile that year. The insurance schedule kicked back an error, and the district ended up paying penalties and late fees that came to more than a year of the building's operating costs. He said they reversed it, reinstated the cost center, everything went back to normal. And after that, nobody touched it. It's cheaper to just keep paying it, he said. That's the whole thing. It costs less to feed it than to fight it. I want to be careful with Dale's phrasing because I do not think he meant anything by feed it. He meant it costs less to keep the account active than to fight the cascade of errors that closing it triggers. That is a completely rational institutional judgment. It is the same judgment that keeps countless dead procedures alive in every large organization. Nobody remembers why we do this, but every time we try to stop, something breaks, so we keep doing it. What unsettled me was not Dale's fatalism. It was that he was describing a system that actively resists its own correction. The anomaly is not passive. It is not a forgotten line item waiting to be cleaned up. It defends itself through the ordinary mechanism of institutional cost-benefit, and it has trained the institution to leave it alone. I confirmed Dale's account in the records. There is a gap in the 14C billing history in fiscal year 1994. A stretch of about 5 months, followed by a cluster of reconciliation adjustments, penalty payments, and a board-approved budget amendment restoring operational continuity for ancillary facilities. I found the corresponding correspondence in the archived business services files. A staff accountant had indeed tried to mothball the building. Her memos are clear-eyed and correct. She noted the absence of a certificate of occupancy. She noted that no staff were assigned. She recommended closure. Then, over the following months, her tone changes across the memos. Not frightened, but increasingly baffled, as she documents utility accounts that would not close, a state report that would not certify, and insurance and emergency planning systems that kept reasserting the building's existence faster than she could remove it. Her final memo on the subject recommends reinstatement to restore reporting integrity. She left the district the following year. I looked. Her departure appears to have been ordinary. I made one more set of external contacts, and these were the ones that moved this from an internal district anomaly to something larger, something I no longer believe is confined to Coldwater Valley Unified. Building 14C appears in the County Emergency Response Pre-Plan. The fire district has a pre-plan for it, a document firefighters would pull up en route to a structure fire, showing the building's layout, its hydrant locations, its hazardous materials notes, its access points. I obtained it. It shows a floor plan. It shows a single-story building of roughly the recorded square footage, with classrooms or offices along a central corridor, mechanical rooms, restrooms, a small kitchen. It notes the sprinkler system and the location of the fire department connection. It notes that the utility shutoffs are located on the north wall. It is a normal, competent pre-plan of the kind the fire district maintains for every commercial structure in its jurisdiction, and it was last reviewed and updated 2 years ago. The building is also on the state's education facilities inventory. Every public school building in the state is reported annually to the Department of Education, which uses the inventory to allocate certain categories of facilities funding. Building 14C has been reported by our district for decades, and here is the part I sat with for a long time before I could write it down. The state's records show that we have, over the years, received facilities funding, a portion in part on the basis of Building 14C's reported square footage. The state has paid us in small increments across 4 decades to help maintain a building. We have used that money along with our own to pay the utilities and the maintenance on the building. The money flows in a complete circuit. The state funds it because we report it. We report it because the state system expects it. Neither of us can be the one to stop, because stopping breaks the reconciliation on both ends. And I have no reason to believe we are the only district in the state with a 14C. I raised the finding formally. I wrote it up the way I write up every material finding, without speculation, stating only what the records show and what they fail to show. And I recommended a coordinated interagency effort to determine the building's status before the next fiscal year. I sent it to my director and to business services and to the assistant superintendent for administrative services. The response I received was the most frightening document in this entire matter, precisely because there was nothing frightening in it. My finding was acknowledged. It was described as a legacy reconciliation item of long standing. I was thanked for my diligence. I was informed that the district had reviewed the 14C question on multiple prior occasions. This was news to me, and when I asked for those prior reviews, I was sent two of them from 1994 and 2008, both reaching conclusions similar to mine and both closed without action, and that the current recommendation, consistent with prior determinations, was to maintain operational continuity and to treat the building as an active district asset for all reporting and operational purposes. I was directed not to initiate any account closures or inventory changes without executive authorization, to avoid the reporting disruptions documented in prior efforts. My finding was closed as reviewed, no action required. I was, in effect, told what Dale had told me at lunch, but in the flat register of official policy, we know, we have always known, and the answer is that we keep paying because paying is cheaper and safer than the alternative, and you are now one of the people who knows. I should have left it there. Every instinct my career has given me said to leave it there. A finding was raised, reviewed, and dispositioned by the appropriate authority. That is how the process is supposed to work, and the process had worked. But I could not stop thinking about the roof photographs, and about the estimator complaining about the mud on the access road, and about the router with 400 days of uptime answering pings at an empty field. So I drove out there. I want to be clear that I did not do anything dramatic. I did not break in. I drove out on a Saturday on my own time to the county road on the northeast edge of the district, to the address that 4 utilities and a fire district and a state agency all recognize. I found the gravel track leading off the county road into the field, exactly where the aerial imagery showed it, exactly where the estimator remembered the mud. I parked at the county road and I walked in, because the track was gated with a chain link gate and a district padlock, and the gate carried a small metal sign with a facility number on it. The sign said 14C. Someone had installed that gate. Someone maintains that lock. I could see it was not rusted shut. I walked up the track to the rectangle of prepared ground I had seen from above. There is no building there. I want to state that as plainly as I can, because it is the fact around which everything else must be organized. I stood at the site and there was no building. There was a cleared, level rectangle of compacted earth and gravel, roughly the footprint the pre-plan describes, bounded by an old fence. There was a concrete pad at one edge, small, the kind you would pour for utility equipment, and on it there were meters, an electric meter, a gas meter, a water meter in a vault with its lid, and a small weatherproof enclosure with a fiber demarcation. The electric meter's display was lit. Its digits were advancing. I stood in an empty field on a Saturday afternoon and watched a utility meter measure the electricity being consumed by a building that was not there, and I could hear faintly from the direction of the concrete pad in the empty ground beyond it, the low, steady hum that any facilities professional knows in his body before he knows it in his mind. The sound of a rooftop HVAC unit running, moving air, maintaining a temperature inside a conditioned space. There was no rooftop unit. There was no roof. There was the sound of one coming from the air above the empty rectangle, where the pre-plan says the mechanical equipment sits on the roof of a building that has never been built. I did not stay long. I am not proud of how quickly I left, but I left. On the drive back, I told myself the sound was an irrigation pump somewhere across the field. And it may have been, and I have chosen to let that explanation stand because I need to continue functioning and because it is, unlike everything in the records, an explanation that lets me stop. I have not been back. I completed the audit. I certified the year's facilities expenditures, including Building 14Cs, because refusing to certify would have triggered the very reporting failures that everyone before me has learned to avoid. And because a compliance auditor who cannot certify is a compliance auditor who is replaced by one who can. I understand now why the 2 prior reviews closed the way they did. The people who wrote them were not lazy or corrupt. They were people like me who followed the evidence to the same place I did and understood that the only available action, removing the building from the systems that sustain it, causes real, measurable, immediate harm across a dozen agencies, while inaction causes only a steady, tolerable, deniable expenditure. Faced with that choice, every rational institution chooses to keep paying. The anomaly is protected not by secrecy but by good management. There is one more thing, and it is the reason I have written this down now, rather than simply letting it join the file of things I have decided not to understand. I have begun the preliminary work on next year's capital capital improvement plan. Each spring, the facilities department assembles the coming year's proposed projects: roof replacements, boiler changeouts, paving, the ordinary renewal of an aging physical plant, and I review the proposed budgets against the condition assessments before they go to the board. This year's draft capital plan came to me last week. Most of it is routine. There is a roof project at the middle school I have been expecting for 3 years. There is a paving project at the transportation yard, and there is a major HVAC replacement project at Building 14C. The 2 aging rooftop units in the boiler, the ones in the inspection reports, the ones whose serial numbers are recorded, the west unit with the worn contactor the technician flagged last spring, are scheduled for full replacement. The project has a budget line. The budget line is a little over $2 million. It has a proposed engineer, a proposed procurement schedule, and a proposed construction start date next summer. It moved into the draft plan through the normal condition assessment process generated by the maintenance history of equipment that the records say is 30 and 40 years old and due for renewal. No one added it deliberately. The system produced it the way the system produces every renewal project, because the equipment has reached the end of its service life, and the data says it is time. Next summer, if nothing interrupts it, this district will competitively bid a $2 million contract, award it to a mechanical contractor, and dispatch a crew with a crane to a gravel rectangle in an agricultural field to remove 2 rooftop air handling units and a boiler that were never installed from the roof of a building that was never built, and to set new ones in their place. The contractor will submit pay applications. An inspector will certify the work. I will audit the invoices, and they will reconcile, because they always reconcile. And the following spring, the new units will appear on the preventive maintenance schedule, and a technician will change their filters. And in the fall, someone will climb up and photograph the new equipment on the roof, and the roof will look, in the photographs, exactly the way a roof looks. I have not raised a finding on the HVAC project. I have thought about it a great deal, and I have concluded that raising it would accomplish nothing except to place my name on a memo recommending that we not spend $2 million to maintain a building, which is a memo the district has now received and set aside twice before, from people who were right and who are no longer here, and whose being right changed nothing. The building will be maintained, the equipment will be replaced, the money will move through the circuit, and every agency will independently confirm that it moved correctly. I am going to certify next year the way I certified this year. I have decided that. What I cannot decide, and what has made it hard to sleep, is the thing the records will not let me stop thinking. For 40 years, this district has paid to heat and cool and light and clean and inspect and insure and protect a building. And every dollar has been consumed by something. The electricity goes somewhere. The water goes somewhere. The fiber passes traffic to something that answers. We are not throwing money into an empty field. We are operating a building. The only fact we lack, the only one, is the building itself. And I have come to understand that in the world of records and utilities and institutional procedure, which is the only world my profession has ever trusted, the building is the least necessary part. Everything else is here. Everything else agrees. And next summer, we are going to give it a new roof.